Welcome to Ta Titi Talk, a music education podcast. We're glad you're here for episode 1. Today we're going to talk about who are we, how did we meet, and then what was our first year of teaching like, but then also when did we feel like we weren't beginning teachers anymore, and really is there a definition to that? Jordan, how are you doing today?
I'm great, doing this thing with you, this unique stuff, getting us out to all the people.
Yes, and we definitely are some of those people where during our COVID quarantine, people created podcasts, people created content, and we waited for some reason until like a year after all that craze to think now's our time to get started.
I think it's because it hit me all at once, right? Like I had that moment where I was like, all right, I've got to call Tyler again, but with a more concrete thing to do,
100%.
platform.
Right. And I would say this podcast idea definitely grew out of the fact that we would have lengthy phone calls that would just hit on 30 different topics. And when it was said and done, my phone would say, like, you were just on the phone for 4 hours. And I'm just like, how? How did that happen? How did 4 hours just slip by of just talking about our jobs, essentially?
Yeah. Well, I think it's because for me, which I mean, by the way, for people listening, we are in two completely different parts of the United States. Tyler's in Las Vegas, and I'm over here in Kentucky. Well,
Yes.
oh, sorry, I keep saying Las Vegas like that's your state, but I
I,
feel like it needs no introduction, right?
I definitely fall into that same thing where I nobody from Las Vegas says they're from Nevada. No one from Chicago says they're from Illinois. You know, if that makes sense. Like,
That's true.
and I'm sure Los Angeles people, maybe, I don't know. I don't know about that one. But I know for Las Vegas, it's like we barely associate with the rest of Nevada because like 80% of our state is uninhabited anyway. So we really got
Oh
like 5
gosh.
cities that we care about. Yeah, the government owns most of Nevada. Not, no, just kidding. That's a different podcast. That's a different podcast.
Side podcast. But yeah, no, I mean just the fact that I think that we both have gone through those phases where we're super hyped and passionate, and then the people around you are not super hyped or passionate. And so it's like nice to call somebody that wants to do the same things or is into the same things. Essentially, popular music education. There, I said
100%.
it.
Yeah, it's been said. So I think the quickest way to get us into your ears about what we like to do is that both of us love music education, of course. We each have experience with K through 12, even college experience. But mostly our approach has been how do we engage the student? And it's not like the content has to be traditional in any sense. In fact, both of us, I think, are very ready to throw out the rule book and just do our best to engage students and see what sticks.
Yeah. Like if you could imagine my teaching, it would be like Google Maps. I know where I'm going, but I definitely go off-roading a lot. But I
So,
get there.
exactly right. So that's where we are now. And we'll talk more about who we are later. But I want to talk about how we met. Both of us decided to go to college for music education. I was born and raised in Las Vegas, but decided to go to the University of Kentucky. It was my way of getting out of the house, getting out of the state, running away from home as an 18-year-old. And you and I met towards the tail end of our degrees, actually. You were in Lexington for what?
Oh, geez. So WGI, it's Winter Guard International. It's where percussion and Winter Guard will go compete in different cities or states, depending on what circuit you're in. I was an open class, meaning that we competed in the United States, but I had to drive like 2.5 hours every weekend to rehearsal in Lexington because I'm crazy. And you had like 24 hours worth. So I remember after rehearsal one day, one of the percussionists from UK that taught the group was like, "Hey, do you just want to come wind down, hang out?" And I was like, I mean, I guess. And I just remember showing up to this house where I was like, what is this? Like what's going on here? What are these people doing at, nighttime that
So,
actually have the energy to talk to each other and be humans? And anyways, that's to say, I just remember like walking in and feeling so exhausted that I don't really know that I took anybody in, but I remember definitely like seeing you. And I
yeah.
felt like that was like, am I meeting this person? But it was like, hey, here's Tyler.
That's
Oh,
okay. So some backstory. We're talking about 403 Pennsylvania Court. This is a house at the University of Kentucky on campus. where percussionists had been handing the house down for generations at this point. Where somebody got the house and their roommates were
Oh,
all
nice.
percussionists, and every time someone graduated, we replaced them with a new young percussionist, and it was in percussion hands for a long time. But this house was a congregation space for drummers, and constantly the doors were unlocked. If you walked in, there's always something social going on, and it was always just kind of like it was our version of like Greek life, where three drummers live in the house, three drummers live next door, two drummers were across the street, three more were down the road, and everyone just knew if you wanted to hang out, you can come over to this house. And so, as a junior or senior, we meet as a passing hello, and all this drummer talk and nerdism going on. And then we don't see each other for probably 3 or 4 years.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good way. Or I mean, fully meet each other when I'm like totally geeking out, being like, who the heck is this dude? How do I get more of this stuff? Am I gonna creepily reach out to him on social media?
Right. So you go on to work with Dr. Chad Floyd in Kentucky, and he created this incredible pan class. Can you tell us about that? Because you worked for it more than I did. So what did you learn with that?
Yeah. So he called it Steel Appeal. So basically, he just offered the opportunity for all ages. And I taught his K-5 group that was in Elizabethtown, Kentucky. And he actually had it in 3 cities before he ended up not doing the weekly classes. Now he just does like camps, mostly because he said, his way of life kind of changed and it was a busy thing to keep up with.
Well, it was
So
insane. As an outsider, no one could believe what he had accomplished. And just to fill it in.
really,
And
yeah.
I was an outsider. I was on this side
Yeah,
of the country
I do
going.
remember being pretty impressed by it at first.
So, just backstory for the listener. Dr. Chad Floyd got all these jumpy jams, and you can see one. There's a pink one behind you over your shoulder. And it's basically a student model steel pan, and he created a class where students could sign up, come weekly, learn songs, put on a concert, do it all over again. Separate from school, separate from any kind of organized group. It was him. And then it got so big, he needed help. He needed people to run satellite camps, which is where you came in. And the cool part from the outside, of course, not having to be a part of it, was it seemed that he was reaching so many people with an instrument that nobody would play otherwise. You wouldn't go out and
Yeah.
accidentally find a steel pan, the same way where like pianos are everywhere or guitars are everywhere. He had a class that he couldn't get enough educators for, of people who want to learn how to play steel pan.
And it was only steel pans, which is neat because even in the adult group, we had a full ensemble, which was, I thought, just for me coming into pans completely different from you, just a really neat experience because there were so many people that were like, yes, I want to try this and stuck with it, which is not something you get to see. So I think it was really exciting to be a part of that because the model for it, I think what was difficult is no one was doing that at the time. And so when it came to my stuff, it was really hard to find material that was age appropriate for kids, which I think is where you really influenced me. And I think is probably why we're sitting here today, would you say?
Absolutely. 100% is that we both have an argument in our heart that there is not nearly enough content that is age appropriate, right? We're going to say the world jumped straight to intermediate. I know things have
Yeah.
the word easy on it, but they don't intend that content for a 7-year-old
Or
who's
they haven't
learning.
tried it with them.
Right, right. Like there's easy band material, but that's kind of under the assumption that they've also already done a method book and they're also in a room with a band director for 6 hours a week, something like that, where we see a student for 1 hour a week, their brain is not as developed, and we go, okay, how do we teach a new song every week, or how do we build a song where they can remember it week to week? So we definitely had a demand for easier and approachable material that simultaneously excited students.
Yeah. Approachable material. That's good. I like that. Not only approachable, but my kids would say with your music, which is where I knew I had to reach out to you. They'd say, man, this has such a good beat. You're like, yeah, it does. Where do I find more of this? So yeah, essentially meeting you. I feel like the real meeting you was reaching out to you to be like, hey, I need more of this stuff. Where do I get it from? And at the
Right.
time, I remember like talking to Dr. Floyd. I was like, what, whoever this person is, get them to write out a method book, please, because I'm too busy to do this while I'm like working 80 hours a week at the time. But yeah, essentially, I just remember reaching out to you and talking to you for 3 hours or so, and
Right.
the rest is history.
Absolutely. And so I was writing material specifically for Steel Appeal. I myself simultaneously had the Jumpy Jams in my classroom. And so I had a demand myself where I didn't have an outlet to just go buy a song. And then on top of that, I learned that my students enjoyed the beats as well, where if you could hear a song at three different tempos, but it has a cool, fun, danceable beat, they'll play Mary Had a Little Lamb if they can groove to it while it's happening.
Yeah.
And
Hot
so,
cross buns?
yeah,
Heck yeah. Put a hip hop beat behind it. They've got it.
exactly. And so I definitely knew that I needed this material. I was thrilled to find out that you guys needed this material. And then the road kind of stopped there, where like I set up a website to sell this stuff, and it's just kind of like a ghost world over there, where it's like sometimes somebody bought a Jumpy Jam and they stumble across this stuff. But basically, you and I are on this crusade of like, not only do we want people to use this stuff, but I want you to create your own stuff so I could buy your stuff.
Yeah.
I
Well,
want
just a community of that.
exactly where I want people to create content because there's things that I don't know. There's things I'm not good at writing. There's things I'm not good at interpreting. Like I can't do all of it. And I would love to find out what other people are doing that's really aggressively entertaining for their students. And so
Yeah.
my hopes are that we can either inspire or let the world know, hey, we need this stuff, and you're not alone, because a lot of us are alone. I mean, you're a music teacher now. How much of your day do you spend talking to a second music teacher?
Yeah. Or any at all. That's something for me. I felt just in my own bubble for a few years, several years, mostly because I did feel alone with the popular music education. That's not to say that when I say popular music education, I think everybody just assumes, oh, you're just teaching stuff off the radio. It's not about that. I think it's about a way of thinking, um, and just your thought process. Maybe it's out of the box. And so I think for this, my excitement is let's bring all those out of the box people together.
Absolutely, and I think it's obvious to us of this works, and we want to use this. We want to create a community of people who support each other doing that. And then there's this other community where they've been doing things the same way for a long time. It works. They have no complaints about it. And for those people, I just want to maybe throw one thing at you, right? Get you one more lesson in your arsenal of things that work already. When we talked about who our listener might be, we kind of kept thinking to ourselves, it's the beginner, but maybe also it's the person just looking for one more lesson to throw into their whole works.
Yeah. Or maybe people like us that are listening to this and they're like, oh, yeah, those are my people.
100%. And I think there's always a new generation, right? How old were you when you got into your first classroom?
Oh, geez, I was 23. It
23.
was in a scary way. Yeah, 23. What about you?
I was 24, and I had done a fifth year in my undergraduate. I was having such a good time there. I didn't want to leave. And then I went from there to grad school and then to the classroom.
Wow.
Uh, right, which is a whole nother debate I'm sure we can have later. But the idea of knocking grad school out first before getting into the classroom, I used to have an argument for it's the best way because just get that degree and move on. And then I've met dozens of people who started teaching and got their degree online. And guess what? It gives you the exact same raise as spending 2 years not getting an income. Uh,
Hey, but you're more knowledgeable, right?
I mean,
Working that noggin.
I would argue that getting a degree in music is definitely was to my benefit as opposed to like if I went to school and then got a degree in, let's say, I'm not whatever I say, it's gonna sound like I'm knocking it, but for my music education career, if I got a degree in, let's say, classroom, I don't know, like administration, I don't know if that would have made me a better music teacher. So my argument would be that yes, if you're in music, I think it makes a lot of sense to knock out your graduate degrees like right away and be done
Yeah.
with it. Um, But yeah, that's probably a whole other conversation to have later.
Yes, let's tab that
Yeah. So the whole point of
now.
the age thing was to ask, you come into your building, you're the spring chicken who goes in there, and then 5 years later you realize there's younger people than you. And then
Yes.
5 years later you're like, oh boy, I'm like in that middle age group now where it's like there's this large window of bleh. I'm not the oldest, I'm not the youngest, I'm just kind of right in the middle. And for a long time, I took value away from that, saying like, "Oh, I'm the young one, I'm the young hip one." And then one day it kicks you in the teeth. You're like, "Oh, there's like 15 people in this building younger and cooler than I am right now."
No, I think it's more of like I'm getting old enough to be the veteran teacher. I'm like, no, don't ask me this stuff. I just work here. I don't want to be the leader of this. I'm just kidding. I love my school. I really do. But it tends to be one of those things where if you're even remotely good at technology or taking pictures or videos or working a computer, turning it on and off the router to the internet,
Yeah,
you're you're like a tech god.
I'm laughing because that hit me so hard right in the heart of like I accidentally proved in year one at my current school that I knew how to work projectors and computers, and now people come to my room and they go, we're gonna watch your class and you're gonna go fix the projector in this room.
Yeah, and you're like, cool, 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 cool. This is what I was hired to do. So yeah, no, but just to say, like, getting to that age where you're becoming the, for lack of a better term, the real adult, the responsible one.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, so you're a first year teacher at 23. Uh, Most people describe their first couple years as either bad or scary. Some people have great success, which is awesome. How would you describe your first year as a music teacher?
All right, I'm gonna paint it like this. I am super bummed out because I did not get a job right out of college, like in August. And there was a job that was actually between me and someone else. They ended up going with this other person because they had 2 years experience. I understand it worked out for the best.
Yeah.
So I just like I'm feeling bummed. I'm feeling like, oh man, all my friends got jobs. What am I gonna do? And at the time, I'm just like filling it up with like helping with band during the day and percussion with some of the schools that I would teach percussion at. So, anyways, I get a call from a nun, and they're like, "We got your name from somebody that was my student teaching supervisor, named Miss Doodah, by the way." Completely, I just think it's kind of funny. She was a music teacher, and her last name was Miss Doodah. Anyways,
That's
so
fun.
she calls me and I go check it out. And I'm like, cool. Well, you have 3 days before you start. And at that time, I'm freaking out because my intention, probably like with a lot of people, is I'm teaching band. I want to be a high school band director. That's it. Nothing else. Maybe a teach percussion as a band director, but elementary school, I mean, I took the classes. I got a good grade in it, but it was not anything like what I expected my first job to be like. So I walk in there and it's a new school. It's only, I think at the time, a year or two old.
Wow.
No posters on the wall. There's no instruments. There's no shells for it. Where's the curriculum? Yada, yada, yada. And it was just a situation where a teacher had been there for a very long time. It was time for them to leave. And I get in there and it was just like, oh, yeah, by the way, you have to start a musical yesterday. And you have to do all this stuff. What was it? The Performing Arts Center. You've got to do this. You got to do that. You got to rent it out for the day. And I'm just sitting there like, wait a minute.
Whoa.
I've never been in a musical. I don't think. I mean, like maybe in grade school. So, yeah, that was my situation. And I did end up finding some instruments. Random note: the assistant principal was a music teacher in the '80s. Got all her Orff levels, and she had bought, like a full orchestration of Orff instruments.
Wow.
And she's like, well, I mean, you can go check it out. They're gonna be in rough shape. And I was like, I will take anything, anything. I'm gonna have to show you. I mean, literally, it's embarrassing, some of the photos of my instruments. But yeah, I go over to the old school, pull out the Orff instruments. They're in horrible shape. I'm super gluing things, duct taping things back together, hoping that nobody plays it too hard to break it back apart again.
Right,
So yeah,
right.
that's my first year in a nutshell. Kids hated music, and they definitely were like, who are you? Why are you here?
100. Okay, I can relate to so many things you said, but some of those things are very unique to you. I'll say I can't relate to everything. Um,
Yeah. Okay. All right. So that's mine. Walk me through yours. Like, paint me your picture.
I
Sure.
I went from not teaching. I thought I'd be a college professor. So it's like I always thought I would teach whatever level I was at. In middle school, I want to be a middle school band director. In high school, I want to be a high school band director. And then I went to college. I was like, I want to be a professor. So unfortunately, I approached all of my music education courses like, you're talking about high school. I'm not going to be doing that. You're talking about, entry level orchestra. I won't be doing that. And I kind of
Yeah.
really had a disdain for anything but exactly what I thought I'd be doing. Senior year, we had to take elementary music, and it was like the greatest
Senior year.
senior year. So like
Sorry. That's interesting. I want to, yeah. Okay.
semester before student teaching. So it's like you've already kind of figured out where you're student teaching, and I ended up. There's a funny story behind where I ended up, but essentially, if you student taught high school marching band, they would make you work for them. So it wasn't like you
For
shadowed the
free.
professor. It was like, you're a drummer, you're our drum tech now. And instead of following a band director around learning what band directors do, you're in the field doing exercises, and you're doing warm-ups, and you're
I'm
writing.
pointing at myself right now
Yes.
for people listening. I'm like, oh, yeah, that happened to
And
me.
I thought that is exploitation to the max. And because even at the time I was like, I have self-worth, like I have a dollar amount per hour, and to think I'm paying to go to college so I can be in a field on a Saturday, no. So I took string methods twice, which enabled me to be able to take orchestra student teaching. So I
That's
student taught
interesting.
middle school orchestra so that I never was there after the bell. I was never there. I was never outside. I had friends that couldn't hang out on Saturday because their student teaching was to go to a marching band competition in another state.
No, no, no. We sold our soul.
Yeah. And so I student taught middle school orchestra, learned I cannot stand middle schoolers. Um,
Really, there's a special place in my heart for middle school,
I don't know if I was just
especially
the
those
wrong
awkward seventh graders.
I don't know if I was just at the wrong middle school or what, but I was like, not my type of people. I mean, I was trouble in middle school, so I just maybe I was self-reflecting of like, I know what I went through, and I don't want to be on the receiving end of what I did to
Oh no,
teachers.
like karma, you mean in
For
that way?
sure, for sure. I
Oh,
mean, I remember I was trouble, and then music was like the one class I paid attention in, which you can see how that worked out. And so, point is, I took elementary music the semester before student teaching. I hated the idea of being up that early. I hated that we had to do the Ram Sam Sam at 8:30 in the morning, and you're hungover because it's college, and it's like that part I absolutely could not stand. And then there was just kind of this applause for, you can make it as acceptable as you want. There was an assignment where we had to come up with our own lesson plans, and when I came up with my lesson plan, I got this kind of cheer for, way to make it unique and creative and fun. I bet the students would love this. And I was like, that's like the first positive thing I'd heard in that class, but also like comparing it to like flute methods. I was terrible at woodwind methods, and like I knew I would never be able to teach a woodwind instrument after that experience. So I was like, okay, cool, maybe this is it. But then I spent 2 years in grad school working again with college students and like people at the highest point of their game, and then it's like, get a doctorate or go to become a music teacher. And I was like, I'm over school. School's done.
yeah, yeah. That's I can't believe you went straight through.
And I look back and I think it's the only way. But then I see how people are doing it now, and I'm like, maybe, like that idea of an online doctorate seems kind of smart all of a sudden. Uh, but the question was, how was the first year of teaching? So let me get back on track. The first year of teaching, I accepted a job offer during my bachelor party. I had no background knowledge of the school other than I accepted the job over the phone. And then I went to the school, and it was this gorgeous campus, beautiful, well kept. And the school was opened as an arts academy when it opened. So it had an abundance of instruments, abundance of technology. It was really a toy chest as far as equipment goes.
I'm
But
like jealous right now, though. Just so
right. I completely understand. I'm gonna call this lucky because I remember those college courses where they're like, you're going to go to a band room and it's going to have 2 working clarinets, a broken piano, and a chalkboard, and you got to make it work. And I remember like preparing myself for like, get ready for a chalkboard, get ready for a chalkboard. And this classroom had like 3 whiteboards and a smart board and a television. And I'm just like, I don't think it's supposed to be this nice on the first try.
You're like, am I gonna be on punked?
Yeah, exactly right. And it was just a wonderful situation in the sense of the equipment was right and the space was nice. It was a nice large space. But I had the opposite, where I had lots of time to prepare. Granted, I didn't have any of the decorating skill set that I think a lot of elementary teachers have. If you go into an elementary classroom, there's a theme, and there's stuffed animals, and there's colors on the wall, and the bulletin board matches the seat covers, matches the theme of the whiteboard. And like my room is like, I put the rules of the classroom on a board, and then they're like, you need border, and I was like, okay, and like I stapled blue all around it, and I'm like, it looked awful. And
listen, I have a thing about that. On a side note, my room, the humidity's so bad, everything falls off the wall half the time, and I just let the kids decorate it up because it's just like I don't have time to do that. So on a random note, some people have beautiful classrooms and beautiful teaching skills, and some people have beautiful classrooms and no teaching skills. So don't feel bad about that. I have like a whole thing about that. But anyways.
So the door shuts on the first class, and I'm staring down like 26 kids, and all of a sudden, I have this emotional feeling of I should have taken piano class more seriously.
Well, that was one of my hardest classes in college. But yes, I feel you.
Yeah, there's a piano proficiency in college where you basically just have to pass a test to prove you're proficient, of course. And at our school, it was like, happy birthday, the Star Spangled Banner, and you had to do a duet with somebody. And so anyway,
I'm so mad. On a side note, just keep going. I'm enjoying this first memory of your first year. Yeah.
So I took it as little. I put as little effort into that as possible. Passed the test by the skin of my teeth, like as a freshman or a sophomore, and then did not play piano in a serious fashion for like the next 6 years. So then I'm in front of the class. I don't have a ukulele. I don't have a guitar. I have this keyboard, and I go, now it's time to teach music. And my fingers are shaking, and I'm like, okay,
no.
C major chord. Okay, friends, we're going to start with some vocal warm-ups. And I'm like, what do I remember from high school and seeing like the choirs warm up? And anyway, I just felt like this overwhelming feeling of, why am I trusted to teach these kids right now? Like who said this is the model? We'll hire people out of college with zero experience, and we'll just throw them in a room with kids, and boy, oh boy, it'll go fine. And I just had that was my feeling the entire time, was like, how is this the system? How is this the model? Granted, if I followed the rules, or if I had a clear path to elementary music, I probably would have student taught elementary music.
Yeah, well, I actually was forced to do elementary school in my student teaching. I thought I was going to have middle school, high school, and they called me and another guy that were doing that, and about a week before we were supposed to start the next placement, and they're like, hey, you got to go to elementary school now. I was like, what? You're doing what to me? So yeah,
you're doing this to me.
Yeah,
that's pretty wild. I mean, it's funny how in retrospect you see why they did things the way they did. And if they had made me switch schools or switch grade levels halfway through, I probably would have gained something, even though I might have seen it as a punishment at the time. I definitely felt wildly unprepared for being in that classroom.
that's a good way to put it. I mean, like for me, like what you were saying with, don't get me wrong, I love the people that I student taught with, all of those things. But I think what happens when you find somebody that has a skill set that maybe you don't have access to, you want them to do that. So I really felt like my student teaching was, go ahead and start teaching. And I'm like, no. I mean, I've been watching people, but I kind of want to see the way that other people do things. So when I went to the elementary placement, it was somebody that also had to teach art. And that was kind of a bummer just because it wasn't fully immersed in music. I mean, she did the music portion when I was there, but I did a lot of teaching. You know, it was just one of those things where it's like, oh, you're a percussionist. Here, do these things. And I don't feel like I really got to soak in enough lessons like I should have. And it's not to say that anybody did anything wrong. I just think there's ways that could be better
Oh, of
to
course. And I
prepare
think
people.
it's really hard to not seem like you're critical of your exact situation, right? If I say which class I felt was the most useless, then it's like that professor would feel like, oh, you don't like how I do. You know what I mean? Like there's no
Yeah.
way to
Yeah.
suggest a better way without it coming back as like, well, that's because your way was terrible.
Or it just
Unfortunately,
didn't work. It didn't, it's not a one size fits all, you know?
absolutely. And I have to say, I mean, that the mindset of a lot of students at the University of Kentucky were that they were the best, whatever instrument they play, from their county. And there's like 150 counties in Kentucky. And their only goal was to return to their county and take over the band director job at their previous school. And I know that
Yeah.
sounds close-minded, but that was a majority of the friends I had, and a lot of them ended up doing that exact thing. And even some of them are principals of the schools that they went to now.
That's a trend I've started to see recently. Yeah, exactly. But I think it's that mentality, right? This is what I'm supposed to do. This
Right.
person's doing it. So I guess that's what I need to go do. And for me, I mean, I'm going to claim Kentucky. My dad was in the army, moved around a bunch, yada, yada, yada.
Hmm.
Um, it's a different culture, you know, anywhere that you move and that you're around where, you know, you either just do things the same way. That was another thing I got told my first year a lot. We've always done it this way.
Oh, for sure.
It's always been done like this before.
And that will never go away. I mean, that argument of like, it is what it is, or that's how we've always done it, that's such a dead end of an argument because it just, that what they're telling me is I have no other reason to support why we do this other than I did it yesterday and I'm going to do it tomorrow. And it's like,
Yeah.
I think there's a real joy and excitement in disrupting for the better, but disrupting those cycles of like, we do a concert this way because that's how the concert was last year. And it's like, well, what if we change how the concerts go? And if they
Yeah.
like it, we'll keep it. If they don't like it, sure, I'll back off. But if the concert's louder and if the concert's, I'm going to go crazy here, shorter, I'm going to say another word, faster.
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
it's just not what people are. I think that's what's hard though, is and I've got very lucky because my administration was also new and they're like, all right, go ahead and try it. But I can see where people definitely get stuck, you know, especially going in somewhere where it's like, maybe if you, especially, I think like we've talked about this with differing situations coming into the teacher before you. So maybe you're coming into a situation where you have really big shoes to fill. Maybe you're
Absolutely.
coming into something where you're like, I don't know, spreading the passion again or just the advocacy for music in general, saying, hey, it's not just I don't know, it's not just singing in from my perspective. In a hymnal book, it's important, but you do that at mass. Or I don't know, it's not just about playing a recorder. It's not just about singing some songs. I don't know. I think it's like bringing back that essential, I don't know, how would you put it?
I think the
Just like what
culture,
it,
my
yeah, the culture. That's a good way to put it.
you talked about you came in and as a teacher was retiring, and that kind of seems like a nice closure to a cycle, right? They get a job, they do their job, and at some point they say they're done with their job, and that kind of is like the closing of a book of their culture. And so you come in. Did you feel like they had a culture, or do you feel like you had to create a culture in the room? Because I would just think like, what would make me retire, and will I feel like I've lost my touch by the time I want to retire? Like if I want to retire, I probably have lost what I loved about my job.
Yeah.
My opinion. So it's like I would probably at the end of my time, my culture would probably slowly deteriorate back into like, I'm done. I'll see you later. So when you
I
came
think,
into that job, is it similar?
you know, on a side note, I always, and hopefully it's like knock on wood, but I don't know, I always feel like if I was going to get to that point, I would really try to remove myself before it ruined music for me. Cause I think
Right.
everybody's had those moments, but I think it was creating a culture and being so young and not knowing, because I think we take for granted that you're going to go to a school that has instruments established, organization, curriculum, lesson plans. What have they done? And almost, I think it's better, at least for me, it worked out that I could create that as I was going. And I think at the same time, teaching marching band, slaving away my life in that way really helps you develop organizational skills that I don't know that I would have had from college. So I think, yeah, it was creating this sense of, here is music. You don't have to hate it. And I don't want anything from you. Just show up to my room, let's jam. And just to show them, hey, our culture can be that you do like to sing, even though maybe before you felt like you acted like you didn't have to. Or this recorder is a wind instrument. It might be the only wind instrument you play in your entire life. So it's just like approaching things again where they
Absolutely.
want to be there.
Right, and I think that's the beauty of the next generation always being young and fresh. And I want to already point out, I don't feel like I'm part of that group already. I feel like I'm too old for that group. But the point being that they have they have the closest connection to that young age group that we teach. But then also they're kind of hip to the pop culture, so they know what references to make, they know what language to use, and I think there's a real beauty to, at my retiring age, I already plan on hating all music. That's already in my plan book of like, I've already gained all the music that's good in my life, and at this point I'm just hitting repeat, and everything new that comes out is absolute trash. Like, that's already in my day planner. So whoever replaces me someday is going to be a tidal wave of fresh air, because it's going to be like a complete start over. To contrast your situation, I came into a school where the previous music teacher, and from what I heard, was basically forced out by the previous administration because they were butting heads. And then that administration also quit. So we had a situation where the music teacher left on unhappy terms, the administration left on unhappy terms, and so I came in with a new principal, and the principal had to bring in, I think, like 12 new teachers into the school.
Oh,
And
that's hard.
so there was this new posse that showed up, and it was not even a turf war between students and teachers, but day one teachers versus I've been here since we opened the school teachers. And there was this posse formed of like, we're here to save this place because it's in ruins. And then underneath that, the students are looking at me like, you kicked out my favorite music teacher ever. And I'm
They
going
look
like,
at probably like you murdered them.
right, you made her go away is like kind of the vibe I was getting. And the students were not afraid to say, where is she? And I was just
Oh,
like, she's not here. Where, and like they're like, why is she not here? And I look like I replaced her in the sense of like, I shoved a person out of the way so I could be in this position. And it was kind of the opposite, where it's like there was a vacancy, and I said I will do that. And that was kind of the part of the culture I was dealing with. Unfortunately, was I replaced their fun. I replaced their good thing. And so I remember those fifth graders. I'll say I never won them over before they left the school. That first year, where there was like, we had they were K through 4 with this fantastic music educator, and year 5 or your fifth grade, you show up, and now we have you. And there was some real anger towards me as far as like, I took away their good thing. And so it took years to build my own culture. I spent 4 years at that school, and so I got the second graders to fifth grade. But yeah, by then the buy-in was real, and then the next person had the same go around where it's like, where did that person go? You're the new one, okay. And it's just like, unfortunately, that cycle kind of continues when there's movement in the district. And I'll accredit that our school district being so large, the Clark County School District's the 5th largest in the country. They have a very open transfer policy, because the idea is like, if you're not happy where you are, we'd rather you get to the school you are happy at than leave the district.
is it one of those that once you get into the district, then you have more reign over the jobs that you actually want?
Oh, 100%. 100%. Like, our transfer system is, I'll say, intelligent. Some people might argue with that. But basically, starting in January, if you're already in the district, you can apply to any open position with priority. And then, like 2 months later, they then open the same positions up to people outside the district. And all districts might be the same way, but essentially, if I didn't want to be an elementary music teacher, I am like 80% confident I could get the school I wanted. Granted, it would have to be a vacancy. It's not like I can go steal a school, But if I wanted to be a high school band director next year, it seems very likely that I could just try because people are transferring constantly. And so there's kind of a freedom to that of like, I'm not trapped. But then the opposite is like, there's constant movement. You have a great team. Like, I opened a school, we had a great team. And after the first year, like 5 or 6 people said, yeah, it's not for me. And they left. And I went, I thought we were a team. Like,
I
where's
know
everyone going?
my work sister left this last year. She's like, we cannot make any decisions in the middle of a pandemic. One more year. And then she left. I was like, okay. But I'm I'm the type of person I'm gonna make the most of it because I like the kids in the school, but it definitely I'm not gonna lie, I'm a little nervous to this next school year for that same reason because the people definitely make the building.
100%.
Because the people definitely make the building.
100%. And I'm so on board with that. And that was partially the reason why I had to leave my first school was that I went in there with kind of a fun crew. I'll go as far as to say like the funnest happy hour crew I've ever been a part of. And that's what made everything livable. You just had a bad class, but then you run into a friend in the hallway and they make you laugh. It almost erases how you felt. Or, you know,
Yeah.
that Friday afternoon comes and everyone goes to our favorite spot and we have a hoot of a time and we go, okay, that erased all the bad things about this week and now we're, you know, going in fresh to the weekend.
You're
Um,
lucky that you found that though. You know that, right? Like not
I
everybody has when you described this to me the first time, I just imagined like I don't know if you're Marvel DC, but anyways, just like superhero people. You're standing outside the school and you're like, we're ready for everything and everyone, children. And yeah,
yeah,
that's really neat experience that you get to have though.
100%, and it was magical. And then when it was gone, there was a real sobriety that came, like literal sobriety that came with like, where did the people who made this fun go? You know, and that was part of the reason why I was like, it's time for a new situation, because I just saw so much turnover that I was like, it sounds terrible, but I was tired of making new friends every year. And so
I'm the opposite.
yeah, I'm like, I'll meet anybody anytime. Granted, I
Like,
enjoy
what's your
meeting
social
people.
security number? What are your hopes and dreams? I'm just kidding.
So I went from there and opened a new school closer to where I live, and that's a wildly different experience to go from like, okay, there's turnover because people are kind of always in transition to the best of the best are applying to get into this school, and our whole goal is we have to open up and be amazing on day one. So we only need veteran teachers, and so I use the word veteran to transition to our last question here. But when are you not a beginning teacher anymore? Because I'll say I was not a veteran teacher when I came into this program and in my 5th year of teaching. Veteran is very loosely used right there. But when were you no longer a new teacher? Like, when do you think that wore off?
You know, I was thinking about this. I forgot to mention my first year, I was only part time. I taught the preschool and then third through eighth grade. And there was another music teacher, K2. And so my first year, or it was my second year, I just remember being like, oh my gosh, what the heck do I do? I had anxiety on Friday about work on Monday. I don't know if that happened to anybody. It something that I think I put out of my mind, but I remember it's probably like by the end of the third year, going in the fourth year, fourth, fifth year, it was just one of those moments where I realized the relationship I had with the kids, the people that I was around, and just that sense of I can walk in here and I know what I'm doing. I'm confident with it because all these kids, the whole school's on board. I just feel like it was like one of those days where you can walk in, which I'm gonna bring up the Facebook Live video because that was honestly one of those days where the school's like, "Hey, we have this really exciting thing for you to do that we know you're gonna love so much,"
And
and
was
it's
that really
perfect.
early on? Like, how early on was that in your first year?
That was no, that was actually that was after 4 years of being there.
Oh, okay. My
That we
bad.
like got this, PR lady, and they're like, "Do this Facebook Live video,"
Okay.
and that's when I felt like comfortable with the entire school with what I was doing. But it's one of those moments where you walk in the hallways and every kid knows my name. They all say hello, Miss S. And I'm not gonna lie, I love that. That was one of those things where I didn't want to like leave that school for that reason. And when I got offered what I thought my dream job was, um, that was the moment, I guess, to answer your question, where I was sitting there and they're like, it was easy for them. They thought I was going to take it because it was going to be over at the high school, assistant band director teaching percussion, and they needed to know the next day. And that was the moment where I was like, I really like what I'm doing. I feel good about it. And I'm not going to say too comfortable in a stagnant way. I was comfortable in a let's see what else I can do. Does that make sense? But,
Yeah.
anyways, to say that Facebook video, like I'm walking in all the hallways and I'm just like saying hello to all the kids. And it was just one of those moments where I don't know, I just felt like more than the music teacher at the school. And I think the moment I felt like more than just the music teacher is that moment where I'm like, yes, I love this. And also, you know, putting yourself out there in the most awkward way. The not today Satan. Do you say GIF?
I say GIF.
I
I'm
think
a
I've been
mad
saying
person.
GIF. All right, I'm gonna say GIF, but yeah, where this little girl comes up to me and she's like, super big arms. I say like arms wide open like Creed, and I just like spinned around, didn't see her, and like kept walking. And it's just one of those moments where you're like, oh wow, how embarrassing. I just did that to that kid, and the mom's like grabbing her to the side, and she's like, it's okay. She just didn't see you, and you see
For
all these kids.
perspective,
Just,
there's a wide camera angle of this happening, so the viewer can see exactly what happened. Where your back is to a child, they come up big arms, you turn, your eye level is way above the
like,
height of the student, and you walk away, and the student is just kind of like,
oh, her mom like grabbed her to the side because I just got done hugging somebody else, and then I go up to middle school and I'm like, how was your summer? Fine. What did you do? Slept. What are you most looking forward to this year? Leaving. Okay. And we're off. And then I try to like high five a kid that doesn't see me, and they don't high five me back. And I'm like, it's okay. Everybody loves everybody here. I still love everybody. I'm going to awkwardly leave now and never watch
oh my
past the 3 minute mark.
goodness. Uh,
Anyways, yeah. So that's my feel. Like when I walk into my school, you know, like have my cup of coffee where I just anytime I'm in the school, no matter what, the 3-year-olds, they say, hey, Miss S, or I've got all of them doing actually hang loose. It's really cute. I even taught preschool to do that. So
well,
yeah.
that's fun.
What about you?
To speak to your not today Satan, I do want to fill in that I saw this video on Facebook, and I know good content when I see it. I saw this missed hug and thought that is the funniest yet most accurate representation of what elementary school is, because coming into elementary education as a male, I'll say it was never in my mind to hug a student ever. Like, I was going to be a high school teacher, I was going to be a college professor, whatever. Never in my mind I'm going to hug a student. And you go to elementary and they just grab you. They're just like, "Oh, good job. Grab, hook,
Yeah.
got you."
You
And
compliment them and they're like, thank you.
right. And you have to fight this fight or flight instinct of like, I got to get them off of me or I got to leave this room. And you eventually just have to like calm that nerve down. But the missed hug is like the next funniest thing in the world to me behind a missed high five with a student. So I saw that missed hug. I downloaded the video. I edited it down to like a 3-second GIF of her trying to hug you, you turning and walking away. Her trying to hug you, you turn and walk away. It just repeats. And then I put the caption of it like, not today, Satan. And I sent it to you and was like, happy good video. I hope you
my
can use
friends
this in the
still
future.
use that, by the way.
I'm thrilled. No, it's a wonderful GIF because it encapsulates what we know about our job. Where it's like, you're a music teacher, great. But what they don't know is that, like, we're constantly avoiding germs. We're constantly trying to avoid getting, assaulted by, little hands trying to hug you all the time. And it's like, that's a part of the job where it's like, no one tells you about this part. No one brings up like, oh, in college when you teach elementary school, you gotta come up with some sort of, air high five, elbows, some sort of cheer, because otherwise there's gonna come up to you and like grab you by your thigh and be like, here's a hug. And you're like, oh, okay, thank you, bye.
You're like, I don't know. What would I do? Yeah. But that's the thing though, is I would have loved that answer in college. If somebody had said, I feel like an expert teacher, I feel good at what I'm doing because of the culture or the relationship I have
right.
with the building and the students, that would have been huge for me, because I think before I really defined that as, oh, is my Orff ensemble also going to play at the KMEA, Kentucky Music Educators Association conference, because my high school played. And in my mind, I'm like, no, that's not successful. I need to do this. I need to do that. I need to get this award. I need to do, and it just, that's not anything that has ever made me feel whole. And I think that's like a conversation I've also had with actually professors, people who have their doctorates. They're like, yeah, I'm actually choosing to teach elementary school because of this. It makes me feel better as a person.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, you really hit on something huge. I did a lot of hand motions for people just listening. But is the measure of the success of your program whether or not you do the festival, whether or not you get the one, whether or not, and then are you a veteran when you get there, or are you no longer a beginning teacher? And I realize now I never answered the question. But if I had to give a hard number, I'd say like by my 4th year at my first school and my 2nd year at my second school, I felt like I'm in my domain, if that means anything. So it's like splitting the difference. To say it took like 5 years to think I know what I'm doing. I know what my concert's going to be before the school year even starts. I know what my long-term plans are before I write them down. It's like, and you could throw me in a room of strangers and I could teach an hour music lesson without being concerned. You know what I mean? And I
Yeah.
think
It's the confidence in yourself.
right. Like
Yeah.
I am the music teacher. I know what's going on. I know what the lesson is. I know what you're going to gain from this, right? I think one of the scarier moments in teaching recently was like we did like a sleepaway camp for 3rd graders where they got to go to like a Boy Scouts camp here and spend the night. And part of my job, besides being a chaperone and like making sure human lives are not lost, was to teach them like multiple music lessons throughout these 2 days. And parents came along as chaperones and it's just, for fun. And having a parent witness the lesson, like I always kind of find like I can turn on the face, I can turn on the silliness, the goofiness for the students. And I have that respect of like, they deserve my best. And then it's kind of like when there's an adult in the room, it's like the behind the scenes at Disneyland. All of a
Yeah.
sudden, very serious.
Like, oh.
Right, exactly. Like I look like a goofball, and they're gonna take this home with them in their head of like, I guy's a goofball.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was one of the scarier moments of like, if I wasn't 100% confident in the lesson I was doing, that'd have been terrifying to be like, and the dad literally said these words like are echoing in my head 3 years later, where he's like, I wanted to see what everyone's talking about with you. And I was just like, uh-oh. Because it's really easy for rumors to spread of like, my kid likes your class. That's a great compliment. There's no proof behind that. Like, yeah,
Yeah.
they like the class. Do they like my class because we like danced to video game songs? Or do they like my class because I'm an amazing teacher? Like, there's no proof behind my kid likes your class. So, but to hear him say like, I want to hear what all the fuss is about, it's like,
It's intimidating.
I hope it's good. And luckily,
Yeah.
I was 6 years into my time as a teacher where I felt very comfortable with like this lesson. Like I brought this lesson to a camp because I know it will not fail.
Yeah.
And it
Yeah.
involved boom whackers, which are awesome. So
It's like what's in your pocket, like if somebody's
Right.
like, you got to do it on the spot. It's like, all right, it's like I've got a bag of tricks now.
100%.
Does that make sense? Like
For sure.
I can just go and not have any preparation and just do it. I
100%.
think that's the difference.
No, I agree with that. And that's exactly how I feel now. Where it's like, you can't mess me up now. Right?
Ooh, I like that.
We just had a pandemic, and you and I had different experiences on this, and we're definitely talking about this in an episode coming up. Of you were 100% in person the entire time,
With all the students.
which is insane because my comparison is I did not finish the 2020 school year. I just didn't teach the last 5 or 6 weeks. I started the 2020-2021 school year online and had to learn how to teach via Zoom, or I'm sorry, Google Meets. Had to learn how to use Canvas, how to make recordings of lessons for students that did not attend the live sessions. And then went to hybrid, where we were in person and some kids were online. So I was talking to the 19 kids in front of me while talking to 80 kids on the computer. And then we went to a model where I'm in the classroom, and the kids are at their desks that they learn English at, and I'm supposed to teach music to them while the other classrooms watch that class on a webcam so they can mimic what that class is doing.
No.
And then summer school, we got to be in person with like limited masks. So it's like that was my quarantine. And when I say the phrase, "You can't mess me up," boy, they tried.
Yeah, and you got COVID and you're going strong. So I'll go ahead and mention that for you.
Very true. I appreciate that. I just got over COVID. Today is day 16 since I had symptoms, so I'm allowed to leave the house now. But it went to the whole family, and I can't wait for it to be over. Unfortunately, it happened during the 1 month of summer we have off. I taught June summer school, and my month of July, 3 weeks of it now, this is week 3, has been spent in the house of trying not to give other people COVID.
Yeah, that's rough. I mean, especially I feel like I've time warped. Like I keep thinking last year. Okay, wait, what was last year? What was I doing? But just the fact that you had to teach classes while they're at their desks while another class is watching you.
Yeah.
I just can't wrap my head around that.
Can't use a xylophone. Can't use a boom whacker. I couldn't use anything that 110 kids couldn't have access to in their classrooms.
See, and that's where I don't even want to say that my situation was better. I just feel like it was all around horrible, but mine was like it was just terrifying. It was like, oh, okay, surely we're not going to start in August. There's no way.
Right.
And then you see all the other schools that are not starting. You're like, okay, cool. I'm just waiting for the email. And they're like, LOL, we're going to really test you to your full limits today. Yikes. We still have school. And it was just like terrifying because I didn't have anybody to talk to about it. You know, like what is everybody else doing? And it was just kind of like I went off the radar, social media wise and all, because it was overwhelming. And so it was just like that was when I honed into, I guess, my talents, percussion. Man, I'm so thankful for percussion. Like, that saved me.
I would agree that both of our percussion backgrounds, I think, are the driving force behind our elementary model, is that all things can be accomplished through striking something, right? Whether it's a xylophone or a drum or a box or a bucket. You know, a lesson can always be saved with, okay, we'll get the drums out and we'll hit the drums while we do this.
Yeah. For sure.
I would love to finish off with a positive note. It's so easy to end with negative notes. So Jordan, if you had a positive message for a first-time listener, maybe a beginning teacher, what's something you want to leave them off with?
I would say, like, if we're going with first-year teacher, it gets better putting yourself out there, getting your groove, try doing your own stuff, instead of just feeling like you have to go online and replicate what you're seeing. It's okay to change things. And also just you're the biggest advocate for music in not just like your school with your students, but with their parents, with their families. So I'm going to leave that one there. What about you? What's your,
I would definitely say that it is not your fault. Whatever happened in the first couple of years of teaching, there is no perfect system for getting you ready for the classroom. And the few people I've heard say that they're ready, they had very like tailored upbringings of like, my mother was an elementary music teacher. I went into her classroom every day. And short of that, it is completely okay and acceptable to feel like your first year of teaching was fraudulent or just insanely wrong. But hopefully the goal is that you make it out of those years and you can then look back and say, wow, I can't believe that happened, but I'm better for it now. So, of course, I would just say keep going. Especially during these COVID years, there will be a day where this is just a blip on our radar of like, oh yeah, I taught for a while, then the COVID years happened, then I taught for a while, then I retired. Like, that, I'm sure that'll be a big part of our life eventually, but I cannot wait for it to be in the review.
Yes.
With all of that said, thank you for listening to episode 1 of Ta Titi Talk, a music education podcast. This is
Jordan Smith.
And I'm Tyler Swick. Thank you for being here, and we'll see you next class.
Okay, bye.
Bye.